Hi guys, so this video is a continuation of the previous lessons. It's not a new lesson, but we are just expanding on our ideas that we learned and hopefully understanding more about sine, cosine, and tangent graphs and the reciprocals, finding more angles. So let's start from where we left off. So we'll start by an example. So this was the last example in the Chapter 8 practice quiz that I handed you before you took the quiz on Friday. And we solved it. And we found that one of the angles in radians was 1.82. So the angle theta, or 2x in this case, equals 1.82. And that makes the reference theta right here 1.32. So I know cosine is positive, cosine is negative in the second and third quadrants. So there's another angle that we can find if reference theta now goes in the third quadrant, and that angle will be pi plus 1.32, or 3.14 plus 1.32, which gives me 4.46. So these are my two answers for theta, or in this case 2x. If we divide both answers by 2 to get x by itself, we'll find that x is equal to 0.91, and another answer will be 2.23. So this is where we left off, and I was actually surprised that some of you decided to divide by 2 right on in the early on in the first step. You can't divide in the first step. Theta needs to stay intact till you find it, and then at the end you could solve for x by dividing by 2, not at the beginning. So some of you did that on the quiz. I hope you don't do that again. Alright, let's look at our answers. So our answers that we found represent the answers for just one cycle of the graph, for one period of the graph. So I know that unit circle represents one cycle, where the cycle is 2 pi. However, now our new part of the lesson is that we got to look at the actual period of this function. So normally the period for cosine is 2 pi, but now if I just rewrite that function as y equals 4 cosine of 2x, where y is -1, I'll find that actually the period for cosine is 2 pi divided b. In this case, b is 2, so the period is pi. So now the one cycle of the graph is pi. It's not 2 pi anymore. So if I were to sketch a quick graph for this, I will see that the graph, the one cycle, the one period stops at pi. So if the question asks me to find x between 0 and 2 pi, what I really did is here, because the period changed, I found the answer really just between 0 and pi. So I'm not really going all the way to 2 pi, so I'm missing another cycle. So how would I go and find the other two answers in the next cycle? Because I know that the graph keeps going, so I have -1 down here at 0.91 and 2.23, and then I have another two answers that I didn't write. So now we gotta be able to find them, so we're putting everything together. So how you find this is really, you just think about the period. So the period is pi. So I know the graph repeats every pi. So this answer right here, 0.91, will repeat again every pi length. So if I add 3.14 to 0.91, I'm actually going to get the next answer in the same spot in the second cycle. And if I do the same thing to 2.23, I will get the second answer in the second cycle for that same spot. So I will take my answers and really just add pi to them because the graph repeats every pi. So if I add 3.14 to each of those answers, I'll find that x equals 0.91 and 2.23 for the first cycle, 4.05 and 5.37 for the second cycle, and that happened by adding 3.14. So I do have 4 answers between 0 and 2 pi, or 0 and 6.28. Alright, let's look at tangent now and cotangent. So let's assume that the same thing happened with tangent and cotangent, where now they're asking me to find x, tangent to x is 1. So let's look at the graph for a little bit. So I know the tangent graph repeats every pi. So pi is the one cycle. And now the tangent of 2x equals 1. So that means I have some places where it's reaching that one. So let's go from 0 all the way to 2 pi. So that angle will give me 1 at pi over 4 and 5 pi over 4. Another way to think about it, as we learned, is to think about it in the unit circle. So I have pi over 4, the 45, 45, 90 triangle, and then also tangent is positive in the third quadrant. And if I put that pi over 4 in the third quadrant, knowing that pi is 4 over 4, and now I have another pi over 4, I'll reach 5 pi over 4. So those are the two answers for one cycle of the graph. Now notice that the difference between them is just pi. So really what I did is just to add pi, because the graph will repeat every pi. So the second answer is always just pi plus the first answer. So I can write a general answer if they didn't ask me to list exactly from 0 to 2 pi and told me to write all solutions. I can write a general answer as pi over 4 plus pi n, plus or minus. Because I know that I'll get 5 pi over 4 if I added pi. So instead of saying pi over 4 plus 2 pi n and 5 pi over 4 plus 2 pi n to get the coterminal angles, I can just say pi over 4 plus or minus pi n. Same thing is actually true for the negative ratio as well for tangent, because if I look at the negative ratio, I'll find that to get to the second quadrant for negative ratio, I can find that by the triangles, but then to get to the fourth quadrant, I'm just adding a half circle, pretty much adding pi. So the general answer, I can just say plus or minus pi n, because that would give me the next quadrant, whether positive or negative. So I can say pi over 4 plus or minus pi n for the general answer. If I'm asked to list the answers, then I'll just add pi, and that will give me 5 pi over 4, which is my next answer in the third quadrant. Now let's divide by 2 and see what happens. We'll have pi over 8 plus or minus pi over 2n, just because I divide by 2 everywhere. And that's true because if I look at b, which is my period changer, I'll find that it changed the period. So for tangent and cotangent, we don't do 2 pi divided by b, we just do pi divided by b to get the period, because the graph repeats originally every pi. So if I do pi divided by 2, then I'll see that the graph repeats every pi over 2. So the one cycle of the graph is now just pi over 2. So if they ask me to list the angles between 0 and 2 pi, I'll have pi over 8, 5 pi over 8, 9 pi over 8, and 13 pi over 8. And I got those by just adding pi over 2 to every answer to get to the next cycle. So pi over 2 is, I can just say 4 pi over 8. So 4 pi over 8 is pi over 2. So I'm basically just adding 4 to the top number. If I added another 4, I would have been at 17 pi over 8. 17 pi over 8 is bigger than 2 pi, because 2 pi is 16 pi over 8. That gives me 2 pi. So these are the answers between 0 and 2 pi for tangent. I hope this helps. Do the worksheet. The answer key is also attached. Thank you.